Alright everybody, so I'm going to go over an overview of lifting my cab on this Ranger for what I'm doing with this truck. If you don't know, it's my four-wheel drive pre-runner truck, and I'm lifting the cab for multiple different reasons, but as you can see, I lifted it with aluminum like cylinders. I forget exactly, stuff like this. It's 3 inches in diameter and they're 2 inches tall. This is a failed attempt at a cut, so this is just scrap pretty much now unless I figure out something to do with that one. But I had a guy, a coworker at work. He was able to cut and machine them to the exact same, with a 1/2-inch bolt hole through each of them to space the cab up 2 inches to create clearance, and that's where the reasons come. So there's the mid mount, the front mount, and I showed you one of the back mounts. So let me show you reason number one. So for reason number one, it's a reason of having this body lift. We're over on the passenger side front corner of the truck, and the reason why I am putting a body lift on this truck is for clearance for this. Roughly kind of there is the clearance up there. Being that I have 2-inch body lift on it now, the clearance works. Everything clears. Whereas before, this was touching this, and I would either have had to bend the AC accumulator up or in to get it to clear this and the line. But I didn't want to do that. On top of it, this bolt would have been like very close to touching the HVAC box on the cab. So instead of trying to modify those things to get this thing to clear, it was just easier to basically get a body lift and lift the cab up 2 inches than it was to try and make that stuff clear. So that's reason number one for having this body lift. As you can see, they're on. Alright, so reason number two has to do with the engine. Now the engine's not in here right now, but if you know, I'm going to be putting a supercharger on the 4-liter OHV engine, and to get an intercooler to work with the supercharger to maximize the boost as much as possible, I would have to have the supercharger raised so much so all the sandwich intercooler and everything would be able to line up. But it would be hitting this, and probably still be hitting this, and I would have to cut the hood and put some sort of scoop on the hood to get things to clear. Now I'm really not wanting to cut the hood because I don't really want to sacrifice my vision. So if the minimum I have to cut the hood, the better. And I really don't want to cut the firewall either, just for the fact that I want to keep the wipers, a lot of things stock. It'll just be easier. So that's the second reason, just to be able to clear all the stuff I'm putting on top of the motor, because it's going to make the motor taller, but not sacrifice my vision. And then the third thing has to do with future drivetrain, because I would like to put a different drivetrain in this thing in the future. You get so much more space out of the transmission tunnel. Like, I could put my full hand on top of the transmission back there, and it would be so much easier. And like sort of the fourth thing is just places to put stuff, because I want to put the battery to the back, and being that I have all the space in between the cab and the frame, I could run things along the bottom of the cab, on top of the frame, to the back. It just creates a whole bunch of more clearance and fitment stuff to do with this truck than to leave the cab down. It just creates so much more openings for doing things. So there's kind of the other reasons to putting the body lift on here. It's really for future stuff to do with this thing rather than backtrack. It's just like do it now, and then it's done later, to where I can slowly change things, and the fitment would be fine and all that other, and we're gonna see how everything goes. But that's about it. So let me go over actually installing this 2-inch custom body lift. All I have in materials for lifting the body is the aluminum cylinders to space the body up at each of the 6 spots, and bolts, longer bolts. So how I lifted the cab is quite interesting, because I did it by myself, and I used that cherry picker with the arm in the door, using 4 ratchet straps and a seat mount bolt here, seat mount bolt over there, seat belt mount over there, and another seat belt mount over there. And I lifted the cab up, but it lifted up this way, so the whole main part of the cab lifted up as the core supports still sit on the frame up there. And I was able to get the back 2 and the mid 2 in, and then set it down with bolts in each hole loosely to make sure they're all lined up. And then came to the front with the cherry picker and basically lifted up each headlight hole or mount, or wherever you want to call this area, with a strap, just enough to slide these in here. These just enough amount to slide these in here, and then put it down. So you'll see pictures as I'm saying this, so how I did that. But now let's just go over the bolts. So the front bolt mount is interesting. It is a long threaded bolt that has the threads all the way up to the shoulder of the head of the bolt. You tighten that bolt down to smush the body mount in the frame, and then as this is smushed, and when you set the body on, the body gets held on by a nut on that same bolt that's sticking up through the rest. So it's very interesting, and you can't find a bolt this long with threads all the way down at the bottom. So you can't do that. I've tried to find a bolt that would work, and you can't. You can't find a M12 by 1.75 thread bolt, metric bolt, 10-9 grade, to actually have threads from the top all the way down to the shoulder. They don't exist unless you purposely order that. So the next best thing is that I ordered a bolt, drilled out the bushing of all its threads to a 1/2 inch hole, and I'm able to get the M12 bolt through the whole mount, the spacer, and up with the nut and then I just have, right now I just have to tighten it because it's not tight yet, but it will sandwich the body, the spacer, and the bushing all at once. It's the best solution I can come up with. And this bolt is, I believe, 140 millimeters long from shoulder to tip. One thing you're gonna have to look at is the amount of threads that stick out, which on this bolt is not very much, but for how long it is and where the threads are, it's fine. It'll still need a squish, as up here you can't see some thread, you cannot see threads come through it, but they're very close. Once you tighten everything down, it'll be fine. The mid ones are just a straight bolt in, and they're not that long at all, but the bolts for these are interesting in the fact that they have a lot of threads, but where the actual threads grab and hold the body mount is pretty far up there. Like, it's kind of interesting. So you have a slightly longer bolt here, but not that slightly long, and you have to have a bolt with a lot of like threads, or grip length as they call it. So I have one that's slightly longer but with a lot of grip length, and I put Loctite on all these too, just so they won't come loose. And then the back ones, they have the longest ones in the back here, and the same story goes for these. The threads, they have a lot of threads, but where the actual threads being used is kind of different. I'll probably go over that in a moment, or you'll see something on your screen or something like that or other. But these ones are the longest ones. They have a lot of thread, grip length, and then Loctite on them, because this whole like puck down here is what they thread into. These body mounts are kind of weird on how they're made. The stock body bolts in the mid mounts are 9.8 grade, and the back ones are 10.9 grade. I don't know why Ford did that, because they're 10.9 here, 9.8 here, 10.9 there. Don't know why that is. I have new bolts on all mounts that are 10.9, 10.9, 10.9, M12 by 1.75 threads at various lengths. I'll probably put the specs for the bolts on your screen when I show them, but that's pretty much it. And if you want to know, kind of hard to see in here, sorry for the light. This is the back body mount, mid body mount, mid body mount. They're under these covers. I put the covers back, but they're all 10.9 grade bolts, tight with Loctite. Cab's not going anywhere, and it's lifted up 2 inches. So now the coil bucket will fit, and a lot of other things can clear, and it makes it so much easier for a bunch of different things to come in the future. So now to actually clean off the front of the frame of all the rust, grime, clear off the metal more to weld onto it, and clear off this. But this is the body lift. Now I can actually clean all the rust off the frame and put the kit on that I still have to put together. I have to take these off from the rack. These aren't being used. tie rod, inner and outer. The boots, they're not being used, at least I don't think so, with how beefy the new ones are. And I'll get to putting the front kit on, and hopefully put the front pumpkin in, make sure everything clears, and set the front end on its actual own weight again. But there's the body lift, and hopefully you can sort of understand what the hell I'm doing and the reasoning behind this. But it's all for planning out for future clearance and changes to this that I won't probably be doing now, but in sections of time, just so it all works as one well-oiled machine, kind of, if that makes sense. But that's the body lift. It's odd, but the only materials I have into it are the aluminum and the bolts. The harnesses aren't stretched out. Nothing's stretched out. Even the steering shaft works. Like you can see, I think an inch of it came out, but it's still it still has a long way to go. So I'm not worried about the steering shaft. I'm not worried about that at all. It'll be fine. And that's pretty much it. That's literally it. That's the body mount. Body lift, body mount, whatever. We'll see what the next video holds.